everyone. My name is Rachel Stern. I'm the founder and managing partner of GovTech Ventures, and we're back for another weekly video on GovTech Go-to-Market. And I'm here today with Michael Smith, who has 15 years of GovTech Go-to-Market and operational experience. He also has a fantastic newsletter around GovTech Go-to-Market. And we had the chance to meet and catch up about our experiences working with a lot of startups, him inside and me as an investor. And we got onto the topic of how to accurately calculate ARR when you're a GovTech startup, because it's a slightly unique beast from traditional B2B SaaS. And so I've asked Michael to come here today and give us a little bit of breakdown of how founders can be presenting their numbers externally for investors, but what sort of working numbers they should be having inside that might look a little bit differently. So Michael, tell me why GovTech is different.
I think, ARR in the GovTech space does have its inherent differences from commercial, and that stems primarily from the procurement function, right? Within a commercial enterprise organization or small business, procurement is inside of that organization. So your leadership, your CEO, your VPs, they have direct influence over that procurement function. If they really want it and see the need for it in the business, they will have direct influence over making that happen. Yes, procurement can slow the deal down, goes through security, goes through legal, etc. Sure, but the CEO can make sure that that deal goes through. In government, that function is completely outside of that agency and therefore serves a different purpose. So what happens often is your champion, let's say that's a police chief, may want your solution, may need your solution, but that doesn't mean he directly has influence over procurement approving that solution. Grants, budgeting,
Politics,
yeah,
agendas.
political life cycles, et cetera, have outside influence that your champion or you have no control over. And therefore, normalizing your ARR, in my opinion, is much more critical in government than it is in the commercial space.
So founders ask me all the time how they can keep ARR realistic without making themselves look small to investors who are, feeding off of momentum and big numbers. And once they start applying things like renewal probabilities, they panic that the numbers drop. How would you coach them through that?
Yeah, I think the key is that it's important for them to show the full story, not just the haircut.
Hmm.
So let me give you a concrete example. Imagine you have a startup with three contracts, a 1 year deal with 200,000, a 3 year deal at 900, and a 5 year deal at 1.5 million.
And that's pretty typical in GovTech, this mix of annual, multi-year, long-term committed revenue.
Exactly. And most founders will do what you normally do with ARR, right? You divide each total by the term and claim that number, in this case, a million in ARR. Looks great on paper. But when we apply realistic renewal probabilities, the picture changes, right? To show how durable that ARR really is. So that 1 year deal, may renew at 95%, the 3 year at 80. And as you get longer or further down the line, that 5 year deal is closer to 60%.
Well, I actually think you bring up a really interesting topic here because GovTech has the reputation of being a really low churn corner of the investment market and the SaaS market. And that's not always the case, right?
Right. It's a little bit of a misnomer, and that comes into play because the fact that multi-year deals are the default
Yeah.
in the government sector as opposed to commercial. So in commercial, you may have month-to-month deals. Typically, you try to push them to a year. In enterprise, you could push them to multi-year. And that's a heavy signal of uh, reduced churn and renewal likelihood. In
Mhm.
government, not quite the same, right? So if you can do a long-term 5 year deal, which in government default is
Dream.
3 to 5, in those 5 years, the grants, the turnover of staff, your champion
Yeah.
may have, been promoted or no longer there, moved on to another agency. The actual signal of renewal capabilities is actually less. So you have to discount that greater in GovTech.
So let's go back to our math again. Contract one is 200,000 times a 95% renewal. So that's $190,000 of normalized ARR. Contract two, the $900,000 one over 3 years, that's $300,000 annually times zero point 0.8 is 240,000. And then contract three is 1.5 divided by 5, which is 300,000 annually, times zero point 0.6 renewable probability, which is 180,000. And you add those up. So the true durable revenue base is actually 610,000, not just that $1 million headline.
Correct, correct. And that way a founder can say, we have $1 million in contracted ARR, which you'll use still to report out to the market, to the public, et cetera. You want that number to be big? Yes. Us as founders, yes, of course we want to do that. But internally, that normalized ARR adjusted for renewal probability, in this case, 610,000. We also have 600,000 in near-term expansion potential inside the existing customers because our deployment footprint and product stickiness are strong. That gives you a level of detail that now you can operate against and you can communicate out to your investors.
I think that's true. I mean, there is, of course, always the risk of that 610 versus a million looking smaller, but you also look like someone who really understands revenue durability when you can talk about contracted ARR, when you can talk about normalized ARR, when you can talk about expansion pipeline outside of the existing accounts. So I think it shows you understand the revenue engine. And I would argue that investors aren't scared of realistic numbers. They're scared of founders who can't explain renewal risk.
100%, 1000%. Clarity always beats inflation.
So, founders keep the numbers real, present the layers, use examples like this to educate your board and investors because it actually makes the story stronger, not weaker. Michael, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Talk soon.